welcome back to the cybernetic communism conversation. I'm Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. And I'm going to start off with conversation not so much related to an AI takeoff or the building of something like a decentral planning set of systems based on that AI takeoff. But I'm going to do something more in the vein of a self-criticism of views that I've held until quite recently that I've decided to re-examine. And the view in question is to do with the honeybee. I have from quite nearly the moment of intellectual maturity, 13 or so, considered livestock systems and animal exploitation, factory farms, to be quite a horror, among the worst horrors in this world. A study suggested that 51% of the total impact of human activity on the capitalist climate apocalypse, causing the capitalist climate apocalypse, derives from livestock systems. That's specifically the rape of the oceans and of earthbound livestock systems, particularly those cattle and chickens. But many, many billions and billions of sentient creatures are murdered in this way, in a tremendous environmental impact. Now, I do not contend that that 51% number is really wholly representative, and I'll explain why, and I've said this many times. The linchpin of near-term human extinction, this omnicidal activity, is the United States military-industrial complex, a world's worst polluter and protector of all other super-polluting concerns and entities. And it must be abolished. The United States fascistic federal government is really the problem in all of this. It's the thing preventing all of us from having a livable world and a humane and sustainable world, which requires a humane and sustainable economic system. The United States has been the ringleader of fascistic activity and anti-communistic activity for about 100 years. And that situation has evolved since, with this world's worst polluting military-industrial complex, is simply unacceptable. So if you want to fix things like fossil fuels or livestock systems, you have to get to that worst user and abuser of fossil fuels and really livestock systems, the fascist United States government, and the military-industrial complexes of other bourgeois nations of the North Atlantic. But really, the U.S. is by far the worst offender in basically all things. The distinction that I made, that I'm self-criticizing here, until quite recently, was I guess I hadn't read Peter Singer, although Peter Singer's not a communist, so I won't recommend audiobook links to his work, but Peter Singer does have a deep understanding of some of these problems of the exploitation of non-living creatures, and that is a worthy thing to be well versed in. And so bringing us back to the humble honeybee, my thinking until quite recently was that I would aver and denounce and avoid these animal products of all kinds on land and on sea, except for that of the honeybee, because this activity, in my thinking, was tending to help ecosystems. More bees buzzing around, pollinating, and the exploitation of the honeybee is not It does not involve the murder of the honeybee, and also the honeybee is maybe arguably a more limited nervous system than some other creatures, and so maybe does not have the mental capacity to understand that honey is being stolen from it as it goes about its business in its habitat. That was my thinking until quite recently. That brings us to the title of this conversation, which is the Pyramid of Cruelty. And this is something that's well understood by people who've read works to do with animal liberation or empathy for all living creatures, and how the problem. I talk to communists almost every day who will not acknowledge that this slave master dynamic that comrades Hegel and Engels and Marx quite capably analyzed um, um, is seen in human beings' relationships to creatures, and that itself is a kind of linchpin to some degree of our accepting this master relationship between the ruling elites and ourselves, embracing our own exploitation. That's to say, if you were willing to accept some exploitation of some sentient creatures, then you're willing to accept your own exploitation. And an unwillingness to accept any of this is a good first step there. But I mean communists who are riding around in SUVs, eating cheeseburgers all day long, so I'm wondering if they're really communists, who will push back quite vociferously on this idea of the abolition of this by certain statistic, 51% of the capitalist climate apocalypse, the driver of human extinction, the livestock system, that should be abolished. This is not controversial to a thinking person, but it is controversial to most Westerners. And so this pyramid of cruelty basically would have three levels. At the top of the pyramid would be those of the bourgeoisie. At the center of the pyramid would be other human beings, sapient creatures who are exploited, people of the working class. And at the bottom of the pyramid would be sentient creatures, and in some cases, quite sapient creatures that we merely cannot communicate with, non-human living things, who are exploited in the trillions, murdered in the trillions for human consumption. And in a world where you can have a cheeseburger that tastes exactly like the cheeseburger that you're insisting upon eating, that's killing the planet and murdering a creature. You can have a cheeseburger that tastes exactly the same, that's made with vegan cheese and a vegan meat facsimile. It literally tastes exactly the same. So why are you insisting on the thing that's killing you? Well, this internalization of this master-slave dynamic is a big part of that. And a big part of that is this accepting of exploitation as a natural law, an absurd concept for the most part, as it relates to human affairs. My thinking about the honeybee was too much about the honeybee and not enough about the problems of human society. And so that's why I have stopped eating honey as well as these other. Although I said I'm not a small child anymore, and I was quite a small child when I first started to consider some of these things, but I did not live that truth consistently for these many decades, and that saddens me. And I consider that to be a failing of mine, a cruelty of my own that I have worked to rectify. But I consider it also to be a feature of the exploitation of this world because um, we really do not have the option, if we want to live indoors, to avoid a lot of the trappings of the consumer capitalist society that we live in. And so we are forced, for the most part, people who live in most U.S. cities, working class people are living in more like food desert conditions, where they have to eat what is available to them. And so the communists that I talk to who push back against this are quick to point this out, right? The um, um, the people don't really have this option, and so the vegan kind of conversation seems more bourgeois to them. But they're not so quick to then pivot to advocating for a world where those options would be available to all. Even when you say the not doing of that is going to lead to human extinction. So you wonder whether you're talking to a communist or whether you're talking to a crypto-fascist who just likes to wear the color red and has embraced some concepts consistent with the dialectical materialist and historical materialist analysis, but not enough. And so this pyramid of cruelty, I think, it should not be overstated if we limit this to only considering the top two tiers, which is really a lot more to do visibly with the world of human affairs. We are really um, accepting an exceedingly bad fundamental by ignoring that bottom pyramid that is a source, a significant source, of the immiseration of those in the center of this pyramid of cruelty. I thought of maybe, instead of saying a pyramid of cruelty, maybe making some Dante Alighieri Inferno kind of reference to circles of hell, but it's a little easier to just say pyramid of cruelty. Um, um, well, I'm going to change gears here. This is sharing this again to this a group called Norman Finkelstein, and I share videos here a lot. One reason is that there is not a barrier to entry in sharing in this group. So sometimes if you would share to a group that has such a barrier of entry, you record an entire video, and then the video is not greenlit in a timely fashion. So you just wasted an hour of your life because it never gets released. Because you kind of have to, with a live dashboard Facebook feature, you have to like actually be able to go live. And Facebook is absurd. It's CIA run garbage. I don't know why I'm still using it. It's really bad, but it's also a place to be connected to other human beings. So I guess be in the interest of being a little more consistent with the Norman Finkelstein conversations, I'll mention some books that I'm reading recently that I would recommend. I'm not saying, did not mean to say that I would not, absolutely not recommend the work of Peter Singer, but I will tend to emphasize works of scientific communists and liberation thinkers of a serious kind first. And so, one such person is L.H. Farsak. This book by Layla Farsak, Farsakh, is called Rethinking Statehood in Palestine, Self-Determination and Decolonialization, and Decolonization. I was hesitant to read this book at first because I thought that it was built on a questionable premise the rejection of a one-state, so-called one-state solution in favor of maybe more abstract concepts of nationhood for Palestine. But that really is not its focus. It was also written in recent years, but not since the uprising of 2023 that's shifted global consciousness more in favor of Palestinian liberation. And so that those two things, I guess, made me at first not want to read it, but I'm glad that I am reading it. I haven't finished it yet. But it really it's not a rejection of that. It's a meditation on things more involved than merely saying the words one state solution. Correct approach to that. This there should not be this place called Israel. This is a conspiracy of European descended people, some of whom legitimately would, insofar as such a thing could be said to be legitimately engaged with, are legitimately engaged with this form of God belief called Judaism. Many of them are legitimately engaged with the form of God belief called Christianity. There's more Christian Zionists in this world than there are Jewish Zionists, by quite a large number. Many of them in the U.S. And in Western Europe, in the Anglophone world, elsewhere, and this conspiracy that I've suggested really doesn't have very much to do with religion, as these type of people will tend to suggest. The Christian, and I had a funny dream. I'm remembering now. I had a funny dream about me sainted mother, me ma'am, some days ago. Dreamt about my mother, and the dream was me mocking my mother, which I don't do in real life. My mother's still living, and I don't mock her. I usually try to have pleasant conversations with her. She's one person who is very much inclined to bourgeois thinking, however, who I do kind of give a pass to. I really won't suffer the sort of thing from other people that I do will tend to tolerate from my mother. And so my mother is one of these people who goes to a Christianist and Christian Zionist congregation. Not an activity that I suggest or condone. And I've said as much to her, of course, but I just don't antagonize her constantly about these things. But in my dream, I was antagonizing her and basically making fun of her for believing this ridiculous lie that this fascist abomination called modern Israel is somehow the same as the dubious. It's not too clear in texts that are referred to, biblical texts that are referred to, that Israel was a nation and not a person. Those references to Israel might be a specific person rather than a country. But even if you accept that there was a place, a nation called Israel, is not the same thing. They're not even closely connected. This contemporary fascistic abomination would be much more associated with violent settler colonial displacement of brown-skinned folks of Arab descent, and the exporting of European folks, and also, again, speaking of linchpins, this is this settler ideology rebranded as right of return. Right, Palestinians are the ones who should be using words like right of return, but they're not. Europeans are using these words to refer to themselves, And this rebranding is essential to maintaining the other settler colonial projects. Just as with the you accepting the exploitation of other sentient creatures allows you to accept the master-slave dynamic in larger, more human-focused contexts. So does the focus on this false consciousness of Israeli Zionist liberation and being restored to their homeland, a whole pack of lies, which I recommend other books like those of Norman Finkelstein and Ilan Pop, for example, um, um, as as good analysis of this, but and others. Um, uh, People other than Jewish people have also written books on these subjects that are as good or better the books of those two. So I can share a list of audiobooks that's quite long that uh, that would include all of those authors as well. I'll include a playlist to do with Palestinian liberation. It's a good idea to read those two authors. Maybe a better idea to read the works of people who've actually lived through those horrors. And so, well, I guess let me change gears again. But please understand that settler colonialism is a pretty euphemistic term, right? This violent invader activities throughout the 500 years, approximately 500 years that we've had Christian fascistic capitalistic systems, um, and the ideologies that uphold them today are deeply flawed, but not always seen so by particularly by the European descended people who, by and large, could just be called European descended fascist pigs. People who are upholding this. So, an example of a problematic feature of this would be to look at a U.S. European descended person and their seeming inability to recognize as people living in slavery conditions, many billions of black and brown skinned folks in this world, or use words like slave or peasant at all to talk about living people. If you ask an American, a European American, what is a peasant, they will instantly start talking about something historical rather than something contemporary. And But there are people who fit that description, and that kind of describes the European descended person as a global labor aristocrat, right? A person who benefits from these systems of exploitation. Your consumer, the fact that you can call yourself a communist or a socialist, but be driving around in an SUV all day eating cheeseburgers, helping to kill the planet, and engaging with fast fashion or other just consumerist horrors. Um, this is a feature of you accepting this position of global aristocracy, labor aristocracy, and erasing the real slaves and peasants of this world. You see yourself as a worker, but you don't see them as the worker. That is a fascistic mind frame. So you would scarcely find a European descended person who's not suffered from some bourgeois ideological failings of this kind. Scarcely find. It's 1 in 1,000 European descended people who should not just be fired into the fucking sun tomorrow, right? You say, oh, Ben, geez, you're talking about ending someone's life. Those are human beings, okay? No, those are the human beings most responsible for the near-term human extinction, okay? So in either case, whether they're treated with kid gloves or not, human beings are going to cease to exist because of these people. So the best you can do, there's no perfect scenario, but the best you can do is to fight against the European descended American. Right? That's the best you can do. Then there's a slim but realistic possibility of ending the capitalist climate apocalypse before it kills us all. If you're not fighting against those people, then you're not really recognizing where the fuck you are or what the fuck is going on. You're lying to yourself, just like the global labor aristocrat ideology, just like the person who doesn't see the bottom of the pyramid of cruelty. But this is a cybernetic communist conversation, so we're going to talk to our little friend, the baby basilisk, about the solution to all of this was the people's AI takeoff, not the current bourgeois AI takeoff, which is hyper-capitalistic and worsening the problems of the omnicide and human immiseration. We want to stop that and build the better thing. And but luckily there are 8.3 billion people on this planet. Only about 10% of those are European descended fascist pigs or European descended people. So there's other people who actually do have a say in what happens in their future, even though they're economically disenfranchised. And so some of those people, like workers in China, are working hard to build this people's AI takeoff and not suffering from this kind of thing, like behaving like entitled global labor aristocrats, or generally being cads to that degree. We can focus on in this palpably and provably hastening period of an intelligence explosion, that is an advanced computing takeoff. We can, and you know, I've been making a study of this, the possibility of an advanced computing takeoff from a time before this seemed to be a realistic prospect for the 2020s to almost anyone except for Ray Kurzweil worshippers. It always amazes me that those people, the TESCREAL folks, the Ray Kurzweil worshippers, the singularitarians, were imagining a radically different social dynamic, but not imagining it really involving those 8.3 billion people, but somehow basically limiting it to bourgeois institutions or some small hundreds of millions of European descended people. Like, if you believe that such a thing as an AI takeoff is going to occur, but you don't imagine that it involves all of those people, no, you don't believe that an AI takeoff is going to occur. And you've met some stupid people in your life, but I guarantee you, you have not met people as stupid as fucking transhumanists, right? I've just tended to dismiss these people as basically witting or unwitting Western intelligence agency assets, right? They're not all literal cops, but the ones who aren't literal cops are doing the work of literal cops pro bono, just out of the goodness of their heart. The dumbest motherfuckers you ever met. Right, like, if that weren't the case, there would not be, all of this would not be prepackaged with just neoliberal and empire-friendly garbage, but it would be decidedly more socialistic in focus and tone. You could say that this is kind of an three-letter intelligence operation on the scale of things like Project Mockingbird throughout the U.S. and Western world to erase the possibility of a people's AI takeoff and only really acknowledge the possibility of this bourgeois AI takeoff, this thing that's making the problems worse. And that's not a controversial statement, although you can't say that to a U.S. technologist or technophile without getting a lot of blank stares. But it's not a controversial statement at all, because look at what happened in the 1970s. From 1971 to 1974, there was being built and rolled out a technological planned economy using computing to have um, uh, a state control of all sectors in a more advanced way that had been done previously. And the United States saw this and said this could easily spread to other countries. This could inspire people to build a people's superintelligence in short order. We cannot, in this world where cybernetics exists, allow this people's cybernetics to exist. And so they murdered millions, installed a fascist dictator, destroyed the technological planned economy. And this activity of installing a fascist dictator, this is something that the United States, I said, is the ringleader of anti-communism and fascism for 100 years, had been doing many times already. This is a unique example because of the CyberSyn project of Allende's Chile, which you should read. I'll take a moment to recommend highly another book that I read recently, which is different from most of the books, works of Marxist, Leninist, or revolutionary or liberation thought, in that those works are generally nonfiction. But this book that I read recently is called Red Plenty by Spufford. Francis Spufford is the name. Red Plenty is the book. I highly recommend that. I can't link an audiobook to that because it's not available for free. But it is available. It would be available probably from your library in audiobook form or other form perhaps. And you can certainly find a PDF online of it, so you can read it in those ways for free. Or you can purchase that book. This is a book that examines these essential ideas that I've described of cybernetic state socialism from a mostly historically accurate view of the Soviet Union. It's a work of historical fiction, but it veers a little bit more into the fiction area when analyzing the development of the analogous system that was conceived of but not really developed or rolled out, the OGOSH cybernetics project, a set of the body of work that is quite substantial, as substantial in writing as that to do with CyberSyn, because the Soviet Union's a big place, and a lot of smart people there and elsewhere is writing about these things to do with the Soviet Union in those years. So in the 1960s, a lot of people were writing about OGOSH, even though OGOSH was not a realistic prospect, as it was in Allende's Chile, at least up until 1974. If you are a person who has anything like an interest in an AI takeoff or scientific communism, and not just scientific communism as a historical recreationist preoccupation, but the highest, what you would actually do as a scientific communist, apply it to the century you're living in, the 21st century, you should read Red Plenty. I would recommend it above other works that I've recommended, like Towards a New Socialism by Cockshott and Cottrell, or Cybermarks by Nick Dyer Witherford. Cybermarks, those are two audiobooks that I link to a lot. Those are more like theory works to do with this subject, which unfortunately does not have a tremendous amount of books written about it, like it should. So Red Plenty is really, even though it's a historical fiction work, is really among the best works to read for a person interested in cybernetic communism. So it's not controversial to say that the U.S. particularly is held back in AI takeoff. And they have stymied the people's AI takeoff so that they could superimpose over that this bourgeois AI takeoff. All of this murdering many, many, many millions of people and creating conditions like that of the capitalist climate apocalypse that endangers us all and will certainly kill billions, if not all of humankind, if we do not radically change industrial bases of the Western world, such as abolishing livestock systems, abolishing fossil fuels, and first and foremost, abolishing the U.S. military-industrial complex. If those things are not done, then human extinction is a near certainty at this point. After 2029, we'll have reached this period of human history called runaway overheating, where already all climate scientists look at this and say basically what's happening is we have changed this planet so much because of the capitalistic industrial bases, because of this capitalist climate apocalypse. We have changed this planet so much that for all intents and purposes, not in every particular, but for all intents and purposes, we are changing planet Earth into something more like planet Venus, a place that cannot sustain multicellular life. And that is what runaway overheating will be doing in the years after 2029. If we do not do those three things, abolish livestock systems, abolish fossil fuels, and first and foremost, abolish the linchpin of all of this, the U.S. military-industrial complex. Let's get back to our dearly beloved baby basilisk and ask them some questions about cybernetic communism. I generally do not recommend using these for-profit AI concerns like OpenAI, but I am using it today because it has this voice interface, so we can interview an AI and it will talk about subjects to do with cybernetic communism in a coherent way, sometimes insinuating some bourgeois spin a little bit, unfortunately, but for the most part, it's not. But I should not say that without saying that you can go to deepseek.com, or you can go to qwen.ai and use web-based open source chatbots that are not run by odious for-profit concerns or military-industrial complex cutouts like OpenAI or Google. So you can have this experience of having a digital assistant, more and more so with each passing day, is this more like a digital assistant without using this thing that is by its nature exploitative and unsustainable. But I am going to talk to this because these other services, as of March of 2025, do not have this voice-activated chatbot feature that I can use with relative ease. I've tried to find better options for this, and I have actually gotten one working, but not as consistently as I would like. So let's, okay, computer, we are going to talk again about the concept of a people's AI takeoff by building an open source large language model workgroup as workforce multiplier, which with many millions of users would become a thing that would transform the superstructure of this world and thus transform the industrial bases of the West and U.S. enough to stop the climate crisis if we are able to get millions of people plugged into this workforce multiplying LLM project. And I think that it's important to talk about that because there's a ticking clock. After 2029, we might not be able to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse. So tell us a little bit of your thoughts on the state of computer science today for building this open source large language model, and give us some technical background on the doing of this.
Your vision of a people's AI takeoff is intriguing and ambitious. The state of computer science today offers a lot of potential for open source large language model LLM projects. Technical background. 1. Model architectures. pre-processing. Gathering and pre-processing diverse datasets is crucial. This ensures the model understands various contexts and languages. 3. Training infrastructure. Training LLMs requires significant computational resources. Many projects leverage cloud computing platforms or dedicated hardware like GPUs and TPUs. 4. Open source collaboration. Platforms like GitHub facilitate collaboration among developers worldwide. Open source projects benefit from collective expertise and diverse contributions. 5. Ethical considerations. It's essential to integrate ethical guidelines to ensure the technology serves society positively. Moving forward, building a large-scale open-source LLM workgroup requires clear goals, a strong community, and sustainable resources. This collective effort can drive meaningful change and
Computer, what's going on here? Ditch. Even the thing that's supposed to not be buggy is still buggy for me. Story of my life. Okay, computer. Those were some pretty good insights into how this technical formation of the open source large language model workgroup as workforce multiplier, the basis of the people's superintelligence, could be built. I think that the insinuating into the conversation about a lot of ethics deliberation, when this is essentially the more ethical position over that of the current capitalistic state of affairs, is a kind of a bourgeois canard. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about this necessity of a humane and just and sustainable economic system deriving from advanced computing. The nexus of this conversation as it relates to the specific collective ownership of advanced computing and thus the restoring of a sort of 21st century commons in defiance of private wealth, and how all of that relates to the climate crisis, the capitalist climate apocalypse. Give us some thoughts on these differing states of affairs.
That's a profound and important topic. The idea of creating a humane and sustainable economic system through advanced computing is quite compelling. As technology advances, the potential for collective ownership of these technologies could reshape how we approach economic systems. The concept of a 21st century commons, where advanced computing resources are collectively owned and managed, could counteract the concentration of private wealth and promote more equitable distribution of resources. This could also have a positive impact on addressing the climate crisis. By ensuring that technological advancements are accessible to all, we can foster innovation that prioritizes environmental sustainability and social well-being over profit. In a world increasingly dominated by capitalist interests, shifting towards a system where technology serves the common good can be a powerful way to counteract the climate crisis. It aligns with the idea of using technology to create a more just and equitable society, and could be a key factor in transforming our approach to both economics and climate action.
Now, I am a scientific communist. I believe that the people of Earth must be willing to fight for a humane and sustainable world, which requires a humane and sustainable economic system. I am a cybernetic communist. I believe that advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary weapon to those ends. But for reasons that I won't get into too much, I have tended to focus on this more anarcho-syndicalist project, the Workforce Multiplying Large Language Model Open Source Work Group. Let's dive into the differences between scientific communism, cybernetic communism, and anarcho-syndicalist cybernetician type thought, because I will say that the main focus on this thing being more anarcho-syndicalist, the LLM work group not being associated with the state, but being associated with a more distributed form, is because of pretty specifically the United States and its willingness to destroy things like Chile's CyberSyn, a state socialist technological planned economy, and many other such projects. So the focus then necessarily requires a strategic emphasis on the anarcho syndicalist outcome rather than the state socialist outcome. Give us a little background and more analysis of all of this toward specifically driving an advanced computing takeoff for people's superintelligence and a livable world.
Your perspective on scientific communism, cybernetic communism, and anarcho-syndicalism highlights different approaches to achieving a just and sustainable society. Scientific communism is grounded in the idea of applying scientific methods and rational planning to build a society that prioritizes human welfare and equality. Cybernetic communism extends this idea by leveraging advanced computing and information technology as tools for social transformation, aiming to use technology to enhance collective decision-making and resource management. Anarcho-syndicalism, on the other hand, emphasizes decentralized, non-hierarchical structures where workers collectively own and manage the means of production. The focus here is on grassroots organizing and direct action, often outside of state structures. Given your focus on an anarcho-syndicalist approach for the LLM workgroup, it makes sense to prioritize distributed, non-state associated forms of organization. This approach can help ensure that the technology remains accessible and aligned with the needs of the community, rather than being co-opted by centralized power structures. In the context of driving an advanced computing takeoff for a people's superintelligence and a livable world, this means leveraging the collective power of communities to build and scale these technologies in ways that prioritize equity, transparency, and sustainability. It also means being vigilant about the potential pitfalls of centralized control and ensuring that the technology serves the common good.
Hmm. And the major distinction between the anarcho syndicalist strategy and the scientific communist strategy is a mistake on the part of the more anarchist minded person of basically describing the state as a primary contradiction rather than private wealth and financial capital as a primary contradictions. But nevertheless, in saying that, one should not dismiss that the state is problematic and the bourgeois state doubly so. So let's talk in our final moments. I think you're about to run out of time, but let's talk about the bourgeois surveillance state as it exists, perhaps embodied by that of very much that of the United States and companies like Google, which I consider to be the one of the highest examples in existence of bourgeois surveillance state effects. There are many other examples, but let's contrast that to what a more truly open society would be under this people's AI takeoff and people's superintelligence as derived specifically from our open source large language model work group.
Your analysis highlights a critical distinction between the role of the state and private wealth in shaping society. While the state can indeed be problematic, especially when it serves the interests of concentrated power, private wealth and financial capital often represent a more direct and pervasive form of control in capitalist societies. The concept of a bourgeois surveillance state, where entities like the US government and large corporations like Google monitor and control information, presents a significant challenge to privacy and autonomy. This type of surveillance can lead to a concentration of power and a lack of accountability, undermining the principles of a free and open society. In contrast, a truly open society, as envisioned by the People's Superintelligence Project, would prioritize transparency, collaboration, and collective ownership. By developing open-source large language models within a framework that emphasizes community-driven values, you can counteract the surveillance and control mechanisms of the bourgeois state. fosters an environment where technology serves the
No.
I'm sorry, but
I know, I know, I know. Okay. Well, um, I would say in closing that if you are not well versed in and laser focused on this subject, not merely of scientific communism, but cybernetic communism, and not merely of cybernetic communism in the abstract, but the building of the people's superintelligence through the best tools that we have available at present, which is open source large language models massified into this workforce multiplier in the many millions. If you are not focused on the people's superintelligence, you are not in possession of um, not even the barest minimum of optimism for the future of humanity in the 21st century, much less the revolutionary optimism generally referred to by scientific communists. If you're not a cybernetic communist, I would contend that you're not much of a scientific communist because we live in a cybernetic age, and to decry such a thing that might be possible. It's not impossible to stop the advance of technology. As I've said many times, if you are a technophobic scientific communist, I assume that's because you have millions and millions of people already with AR-15s in hand, ready to march on Washington to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse in a more traditional way. But no such millions of people exist in that formation. So I would say that then the technophobic scientific communist is doing something little more than concern trolling, undermining this most powerful revolutionary weapon in history, the this advanced computing, which has these takeoff prospects, and this AI takeoff already underway. Of course, is not the suitable AI takeoff, but we can build the suitable thing with ease. We can repurpose all of this, and so I would ask you to reflect upon this concept of revolutionary optimism in this context. I've not met a lot of people who really seem to understand these ideas. They parrot what they have heard, but unfortunately, a lot of that is very much shaped by bourgeois ideology, just as the book Settlers by Jay Sakai describes the European descended person as this global labor aristocrat that I alluded to, a person benefiting from the exploitation of black and brown folks in the U.S. and elsewheres, but describing themselves nevertheless, in some cases, as socialistic, despite not being truly willing to challenge those exploitative institutions. As I said, the European descended person of the United States is scarcely even able to say the words slave or peasant to describe the living slaves and peasants of this world who exist in the many millions and billions. And so, how could they possibly then really be interested in ending the exploitation of man by man when they do not acknowledge what the lion's share of that exploitation really is and how that exploitation serves them and their consumerist North American lifestyle? These failings, the failings of bourgeois ideological baggage, the neo-colonial trappings that we sometimes or so frequently ignore or understate. These are serious, serious concerns, and prioritizing again the downfall of the United States military-industrial complex as the world's worst polluter and champion and protector of all other super polluters is a necessary step. I saw someone on Facebook today say these words, which were quite intelligent, that Social Security is not a Ponzi scheme, as suggested by one Elon Musk, who is, of course, preoccupied with cryptocurrency scams that actually are Ponzi schemes. But he says that this Social Security program as a Ponzi scheme. Of course, that is the talk of a lunatic. So this person said, well, Social Security is not a Ponzi scheme. Capitalism is a Ponzi scheme, which is an accurate statement, right? The capitalism has these aspects um, uh, commodifying things to the point where we've moved away from this period of industrial capitalism where commodification of actual real world things was occurring to the commodification of financial instruments that don't actually exist or change anyone's life at all. They don't affect material conditions. Much of the United States economy is built on such things, and so that's why you could have just trillions of dollars being removed from the stock market a couple of times already in the last month um, because it's not a real economy, right? But the this person, this who said one kind of coherent thing, is clearly in possession of some other settler colonial bourgeois ideology because I saw them posting just a few days before some things that were suggesting U.S. intervention in Russia. The U.S. empire is, of course, the world's worst empire in history, worse than Nazi Germany, which only existed for a few years. And although it did many horrible things, leading to the death of millions, including many comrades, those were the first victims, including many marginal disabled people, including also many Roma people, including also many Jewish people, and others. Um, um, those crimes occurred over the course of a few years. The United States has committed genocides over the course of more than a century. The United States significantly depopulated the Philippines in this era before state socialism existed, and has committed many, many mass murders. 300 million people, according to the book Endless Holocausts, which is a good accounting of all of this, in anti-communist wars and wars of theft and other violent destabilizing activities. And so the United States is more fascistic than the thing that you think of as quintessentially fascistic in every way that matters. And so, again, if you are somebody who says something anti-capitalist in one context, but then says something pro-imperialist, pro-U.S. imperialism in another context, you are not actually an anti-capitalist. You are a person whose bourgeois ideology is interfering with your ability to truly make a difference. And that is a feature of not being a scientific communist, not making the study of these things to do with liberation thought and revolutionary thought and action. You have to study those things, and you have to form relationships with people, such as affinity groups or socialist gun clubs or truly revolutionary political organizations. You have to make those relationships, and you have to affiliate with people who study this, and you have to also study this. It's not possible to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse without many millions more people doing this, and that's not possible if you are going to Bernie Sanders rallies, where he at one point says something that sounds sort of anti-capitalistic, and then describes the United States as, quote, a beacon of democracy, as he said in recent days. The United States is not ever a beacon of democracy in those years that it has existed, where it killed 300 million people for no reason. That's a lie. This person is a person who has more in common. Bernie Sanders has more in common with Benito Mussolini than he does with any state socialist. State socialist must necessarily be anti-imperialist, must necessarily be favoring and willing to support the abolition of private wealth, not simply wanting a public health service, but not willing to abolish private wealth in other sectors, but the uniform abolition of private wealth. That's a description of Bernie Sanders again. Um, and again, so the distinction between a socialist, really, and a communist is the difference between being willing to fight, being able to fight. And there are not real communists, not only in the sense that this is an aspirational position, because the communistic world doesn't exist yet, but also because um, this you have where are those millions of people who are fighting the United States military-industrial complex to stop the homicide, right? This is more of a theoretical thing at this point, um, and uh, so. But that's the key distinction between so a person who says it's talking again about this guy Anthony Zenkis, who is employed by one of the most controversial um, 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 academic institutions right now, Columbia University, which should be shut down and and razed to the ground for its support for imperial violence and against Palestinians. But he works there, and he describes himself. By and large, his focus of his work is not on nonviolence, but it says in his biography, and he says from time to time that he described himself in non-revolutionary terms as a nonviolent communist. So that would be a person who would be at best more socialist than a communist, right? That would be a person who supports the abolition of private wealth, but not the necessity of revolution to actually abolish private wealth. So that's a distinction between really a liberal and a person to their left, a more revolution-minded person. The liberal is somebody who recognizes some of the problems of the world, but is not willing to take the appropriate action to stop it, such as revolutionary action against the world's worst polluter, the U.S. military-industrial complex. So, that's a person who has not a real great analysis of all of this, Anthony Zenkis. If he's describing himself as a nonviolent communist, that's rather a contradiction. And but this is a big account, communist, a person in the communist sphere of influence in social media. A lot of these big accounts suffer from this failing, right? If they were really liberation focused, working in those organizations, if they were really cadre, it wouldn't really be probably on social media hardly at all. They would be working on that project of getting those 5 million people positioned outside of the Pentagon or White House with AR-15 in hand to stop the military-industrial complex from killing all of humankind. It's a pretty straightforward project, but one that we have not been able to really engage with for the most part, and we fail to engage with this with the millions of people required to do so at all of our peril. So there's very little that you would learn for the most part from these kind of influencers in the pejorative sense, who of the left. You should disengage from this at once and begin working with people in this way toward building the thing that could actually stop the capitalist climate apocalypse. And then when that is done, um, uh, making other inroads towards building a livable world as soon as possible. And again, I would contend, I could be wrong, but I would contend that there is no realistic prospect for doing that in the time frame required, the ticking time bomb of the capitalist climate apocalypse, which will have effectively exploded after 2029 without using this most powerful revolutionary weapon in history, um, advanced computing, so-called AI. And if we are able to do either of those two things, the traditional um, people's revolution or the AI-driven people's revolution, we will see effects well beyond merely the stopping of the capitalist climate apocalypse, such as AI-driven single-payer public health services leading to universal super longevity, and other effects that we cannot even anticipate that would be more titillating still, perhaps, than even indefinite lifespan for everyone on Earth. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For you see, my dear comrade, very soon cybernetic communism will win, and make no mistake.